He was born into a world that seemed designed to limit him. Yet he would rise to build a world that limits everyone else. John Davison Rockefeller, a name that feels less like a man and more like a force, a shadow stretching across history, a power that never left, a system you still live inside, even now. This is not just a story of wealth, it is the story of how one man shaped the invisible architecture of modern life, how he built pipelines that went far beyond oil, pipelines that reached into governments, banks, charities, families, and nations, pipelines that still run beneath your feet today. To understand the present, you must walk back into the smoke, fire, and ambition of the 1800s. The United States was young, chaotic, raw. Industrialization was exploding across the land like a fever. Money was being made so quickly that rules barely mattered. It was a time when titans weren't born. They were forged. And in the middle of this roaring new world stood a quiet, calm young man with a notebook in his hand. A man who studied numbers the way others studied scripture. A man who believed that discipline could conquer chaos. John D. Rockefeller. He started with nothing more than a small bookkeeping job, $670 a year. But that wasn't his goal. His goal was control, absolute, unquestioned control. And he knew exactly where to find it. Oil. It was the blood of the new world, fuel for lamps, machines, factories, progress. But the industry was messy, unpredictable, and unsafe. Thousands of refineries appeared overnight, each one a gamble. Most failed within months. Rockefeller watched them, quietly, patiently, and he realized something no one else saw. Oil wasn't about striking it rich, it was about refining it, managing it, systemizing it. The real power wasn't in the ground, it was in the structure above it. So in 1870, he formed the company that would rewrite economic history, Standard Oil. It didn't explode onto the scene, it expanded like a shadow, slowly, silently, swallowing everything in its path. He used a strategy so precise that even modern CEOs study it, buy competitors. Cut transportation deals, lower prices until rivals collapsed, absorb their assets, repeat. He didn't just compete, he redesigned the rules, while everyone else was still learning the game. By the time the world noticed what he was doing, it was too late. Standard Oil controlled more than 90% of America's refining capacity. Think about that. 9 out of every 10 drops of refined oil, all flowing through the hands of one man, one mind, one system. And Rockefeller loved systems. He built organizations like a watchmaker builds clocks, every gear precise, every movement intentional. Workers followed routines with military discipline. Managers filed reports with mathematical clarity. Nothing was left to chance. To Rockefeller, chaos was the enemy. Order was salvation. And he believed the world needed him to impose that order. But power of that scale cannot stay quiet forever. Journalists called him a tyrant, politicians called him a threat. Public anger rose like a storm. And eventually the US government stepped in. In 1911, the Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil to be broken into more than 30 smaller companies. The world celebrated. People believed the giant had finally been defeated. But Rockefeller, he simply smiled. Because he knew something the world didn't. He owned huge stakes in every single one of the companies Standard Oil had split into, and as those pieces began to grow independently, they became even more valuable. The breakup didn't destroy him, it multiplied him. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Conoco. These companies didn't replace Standard Oil, they were Standard Oil, just wearing different names. The system that people believed they had escaped was simply reborn. By the time Rockefeller died in 1937, he was the richest man in modern history, adjusted for inflation, worth over $400 billion. But his legacy wasn't money. His true legacy was power, the architecture of influence he left behind. Because Rockefeller understood something profound: if you want control, you don't control people. You control the systems people depend on. So he expanded his reach far beyond oil. He built banks, universities, medical institutions, foundations that influence global education and public health. He shaped modern philanthropy itself, using charity as a tool not just to give back, but to guide the future. Every donation, every institution, every partnership, all interconnected like branches of the same vast, quiet empire. Even today, the Rockefeller Foundation influences global policy, healthcare, agriculture, technology, and economics. Their fingerprints appear in programs across the world, from scientific research to government reforms to global development strategies. You might not see it, you might not feel it, but the structure built more than a century ago still stands. And that brings us to a deeper truth. John D. Rockefeller didn't just build a company, he built a blueprint, one that nearly every billionaire, corporation, and global institution follows today. Centralization, optimization, influence through infrastructure, control through dependence. Rockefeller understood that the greatest power is the power no one realizes you have. When you turn on a light, when you fuel a car, when you walk into a modern hospital, when you hear the word philanthropy, you're stepping into a world shaped by him. He didn't just shape an industry, he shaped a mindset, a belief that order must come from the top, that progress must be guided, that chaos must be tamed, that systems must be built, and those systems must endure. You may never escape the influence of John D. Rockefeller, not because he forced it on you, but because the world he created became the world we all live in. A world where power hides behind foundations, where influence moves through institutions, where wealth becomes a network instead of a number, where control is not shouted, it's designed. Rockefeller mastered this design, and he left it behind for others to follow. So, when you hear his name, don't just think of a man, think of a structure, a blueprint, a system that still shapes your choices, your opportunities, your future. The story of John D. Rockefeller is not a story of oil. It's a story of architecture, of a world built intentionally, piece by piece, idea by idea. A world that expanded long after he was gone. A world where his influence lingers like gravity, silent, constant, unavoidable. You don't need to admire him. You don't need to fear him. But you must understand him, because in many ways, your life is still connected to the empire he created. John D. Rockefeller, the man who built a system so vast, so deep, so quietly powerful that escaping it was never an option. Not then, not now, maybe not ever.